everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
I think you hacked our business plan, but you are spot on in many ways. Yeah.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for our show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. So I want to welcome Francois Kress, who is the CEO of Feelmore Labs today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You have led global luxury brands such as Louis Vuitton, LVMH Fashion Group, Bulgari, Prada, to name a few. And now you're leading a health and wellness startup. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey up to this point?
Yes, absolutely. And I know it's a little troubling sometimes to figure out how someone who worked in fashion and luxury for so long ends up in neuroscience and in tech. But actually, I started my life before luxury as mostly studying science for many years and hard sciences with mathematics in particular. And I always had a strong interest in science first and technology. It's kind of by chance that I landed in luxury in France without, getting too much in the detail of French education. If you are a good student, usually you study science, and then you can end up anywhere, which is kind of what happened. I worked with Bernard Arnault. The name is familiar, I'm sure, because the founder and still chairman of LVMH, which is the largest luxury group in the world. Then it was very exciting at the time. It was when the luxury industry starting to consolidate and become more corporate and more global as well. And it was still only retail based. There was no internet to throw a wrench in this beautiful traditional industry. Then those years were very pioneering. I worked in Asia, I worked in Europe, obviously. I worked in the US for years on those brands, all very prestigious brands. And it was an exciting time, 25 years or so, moving around the world, working and growing these big brands, which are now massive, but were mostly family-based back then. And it was I worked through this industry at the transitional time from family-owned traditional business to really big corporate global businesses. And very exciting, lots of learnings, because it's a business which is mind-boggling when you think about it. It's basically you are selling people very expensive products they don't need, to sum it up. These products don't solve a problem, right? Moving to the startup world, I realized that everybody is thinking in terms of problem solution, right? Luxury doesn't really solve a problem. The functionality of a handbag is the same as the functionality as a shopping bag. Then you could really carry your stuff around in a paper bag, which is more modern than plastic. And you don't need to spend $10,000 on a Hermes bag, to mention a prestigious brand, or more sometimes. And there's a lot of layers of values added to there, which is part of, involves tradition, involves heritage, involves quality, involves desirability, and moreover involves personal social positioning. And most of the value and pricing of these brands carry all these values, which are really not functional and don't solve a concrete problem, but solve a much more complex problem, which is how people see themselves within society, which is fascinating. And all that was tons of learning. How do you do marketing for these brands is very different than doing marketing for washing powder, for instance. So there is a lot of learnings that I took with me until in 2010, I was invited to join the board, a bit by chance again, of a biotech firm, startup at the time, which in the space of 5 years until 2015, went through all the stages of financing and an IPO and then an FDA approval. It was an injection product for the double chin. It worked, and it sold very well to Allergan at the time. We had a beautiful exit for over $2 billion at the time in 2015. The company was called Kythera. biopharmaceuticals. Then this period as a board member, independent board member, gave me finally exposure to the world of investments, VCs, science for consumers, and biotechs, and completely different world from where I come from on my past, few decades in luxury. And that's where, because of my science background also, the idea started forming of combining both and trying to use proper science while using, I would say, some of the signs of luxury to understand why people would acquire a product that they don't necessarily understand from the get-go. Then that's how one thing led into another. And because I met great investors during my adventure with Kyocera, I decided to switch entirely and pivot to neuroscience and neurotech about 5 years ago now, and leave the luxury industry.
Well, I think what I can say is that you've been through some periods of significant transitions. You mentioned during the luxury from family-owned brick and mortar to more digital global conglomerates and corporations. And similarly, on the medtech and wearables, we are definitely starting to see kind of the next major transition. And that's a very exciting period. So it's amazing how you've been able to associate yourself with disruption in both of these different industries. One comment I was going to share is one thing that I think luxury is kind of interesting is, aside from the culture and the relative ranking in that culture, and the perception, of course, perception of value, is this notion of therapy, in the sense that some people find therapy or maybe short-lived happiness in shopping or consumerism. And it's interesting because fundamentally what you're working on is this notion of relaxation. It comes down to functionally stress, de-stressing, and better sleep. But at the end of it, it's this notion of, things that you would have to seek out elsewhere through different means. Now you can actually get it here in a more scientific fashion. So that brings up to our first question, which is around sleep and stress are probably some of the biggest health issues that almost all of us face today. I wonder, what is interoceptive pathway and this notion of how you feel sensor, if that makes sense. And just give us a sense in terms of what is it and how does it pick up all that information from everything from our skin, lungs, stomach to the rest of our organs, and then be able to kind of centralize in terms of how you're really feeling at this point.
That's first of all spot on the parallel between luxury and what I do now. There is definitely a strong part of self-perception and self-improvement involved in both. But yes, and interoception is a relatively new science, although it's mentioned up to the early 20th century in some papers, but it has become more popular in the past decade or so. It's actually the way your brain, as the ability of your brain to perceive the state of your inner state, the state of your organs. How does it get these signals? There's a constant dialogue between your brain and the rest of your body. Obviously, we usually talk about mind and body, but it's one thing, right? It's constantly dialoguing. One doesn't exist without the other. And this dialogue can be more or less, I would say, transparent and clear. Then we know that this interoception, first of all, there is a location in the brain which handles interoception. At least it's around the insular cortex, which is a very central part of the brain, which also is responsible to modulating anxiety, or at least your resilience to anxiety. Then this center of interoception, the insula, is a part of the brain that we got interested to, because a better interoception usually means a lot of things align in your everyday life, from sleep, stress, anxiety, and even, we haven't studied it, but there's a lot of scientific literature there on eating disorders and more serious mental disorders even, which are linked to the fact that your brain misreads the signals sent by your body and your organs, including the skin, which is obviously your largest organ and connects to the outside world. And by misreading it, there's a dysregulation which takes place, and therefore all kind of ailment, physical and mental, can come from there. We looked at it first of all. It's not that we created the company with interoception in mind. There are steps. There was a lot of research, science, reading, and experimentation until we realized. And then, by the way, most recently, a few days ago, we got a peer-reviewed third-party study published showing MRI images of what happens in the brain after using our technology for 30 days, twice a day. And you see actually the insula I mentioned, this controlling center of interoception, strengthening or thickening or evolving over these 30 days. Not a formal proof completely, but very consistent with the fact that our technology not only looks at the effects people are reporting on themselves while using it, but also what the brain is saying. So we were very comforted over time by all these evidences coming together from people reporting, which involve obviously some placebo, and the fact that the brain itself is showing improvement in the area in charge of interoception. Then yes, interoception is essential. I'm pretty sure that in the next few years, unless the name evolves, it's not necessarily a customer-friendly name, will be much more popular. You see much more press already today on the topic, because if you have the ability to improve your interoception, you will see a lot of other things, including stress, including sleep, but many other things. And we are just publishing, by the way, a study on cognitions and memory, attention, basically all the things you can do with your brain, improving as well. Then the alignment is not limited to one claim. Using the same technology, improving interoception actually allows the brain to do a much better work for your body and a better work for itself, going down to all the way to empathy, for instance. We know that higher interoception people usually have a much better reading of themselves and therefore a better reading of others, and therefore are better at interpersonal relationships, and they usually display more empathy. Then it's very interesting at a broad range. We are not making these claims, obviously, because our principle is to make claims where we have data. And so far, we have really strong data on sleep, stress and anxiety, and on cognitive improvements.
You covered a lot, and I think what I would say is for listeners is one of the areas we're going to be covering a little bit more in depth is this notion of affective touch. And it's almost like getting a hug from someone that you love. Maybe if you're a parent, it's hugging your child. Maybe it's a pet or it's your loved one. And it's this notion of touch and acceptance. And it's amazing how powerful. And I'm just, and again, without getting into the potential implications of beyond what you guys are evaluating, it really has a lot of therapeutic aspects to it. I wonder if you could just kind of go a little bit deeper around Feelmore Labs, because Feelmore Labs is really more of a kind of a holding group that potentially is going to birth other products in addition to the Cove device. But let's get into the power of this touch, this affective touch response, and how the device is triggering that affective touch to provide some of these benefits that you're talking about.
Wonderful. And affective touch is one of the biggest trigger of interoceptive improvement. Then it's totally connected. We're not talking about different things here. It's one way to improve interoception is by repeatedly applying affective touch to an individual. Then affective touch, the definition, which is strict, which is slightly different from a hug, because I think we see a lot, in papers, at least, vulgarization papers that any touch is affective touch. No, affective touch by definition is actually a very slow motion on the skin. There's a speed, which I won't quote, and a very low pressure, even more important, because it's interacting with receptors you have in the skin, which are entirely dedicated to this affective touch, and that's the only thing they do. They detect affective touch and connect to the insula. Those receptors don't react if you apply too much pressure or if you go too fast or too slow. Then it's very, basically, it's speculated that it's an evolutionary equipment we have in our body to interact with other people in an affective way. And then a hug would be pressure, probably too much pressure, a proper hug. But if you rub while you rub, then you get affective touch while applying very gentle pressure. And those receptors will then tell the brain you are in a safe place. And this safe place triggers all these benefits. Then shortcut to affective touch. And that's really where we started. That's what we apply. And the idea was, how can we build a device, a wearable, which basically implements this affective touch the least invasive way possible. Then we landed in a place where our device sits on the head and applies gentle vibration, which are very specifically designed to trigger those receptors. Then it's not random vibration just for the effect or the sensation. It's actually just because they are designed specifically to trigger them. And you let them play for 20 minutes at a time. And that's where we see the brain through EEG studies, MRI, and self-reported benefits shows that we are most likely hitting those receptors and involving the insula in those sessions. And there is part of the technology which is perceivable, which is gentle vibration that people appreciate. It's very, very gentle. It's barely perceivable. It doesn't really matter. The part which matters is what happens behind the scene with the insula. And there are two layers there. It's not about feeling it. It's about what happens. It's kind of an effortless meditation. It's putting your brain in the right place while you can do anything else, which is the beauty of it. And yeah, for now, the form factor is wrapping around your head, behind your ears, and it does the job. 20 minutes a day, preferentially twice a day at the beginning to get the brain in the right place within 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think for those that are not as familiar with the product, they're probably getting lost in terms of the vibration. But to your point, that's not the key aspect. Going a little bit deeper, it's about the alpha waves. The brain waves has many different types of wavelengths. You got the delta that helps you with deeper sleep. You got the beta and gamma that helps you with more active focus processing work. But it's the alpha wave in particularly that's helpful because it's indicative of the relaxed state, or what we would consider when we have a quiet mind because we're not cluttered with thoughts, for instance. And that's really what it's activating right behind there in terms of the wavelength. And that's what the MRI is picking up. Is that correct?
It's correct. I mean, the wave ranges, which are basically alpha, beta, etc., are based on the frequency of the waves you detect from the brain or different areas of the brain using an EEG cap, usually, which is how we look at those waves. And basically, the alpha waves are detected on the top of the head, which is very consistent with the fact that the insula is right under that place. And, an EEG shows basically what happens at the surface of the brain. MRI shows what happens. It's a photography of what happens inside your brain. Then from MRI, we confirm the involvement of the insula. From EEG, we confirm that alpha waves go up after about 10 minutes of a session and stay up for the rest of the session and even hours later. And alpha waves are characteristic, for instance, which is the best thing for people to relate, as you said, a quiet mind, but like a meditative state, which not everybody can reach, but like successful people at meditation get into a high alpha state, which is you are fully awakened, you are not falling asleep, but your brain is in this intermediate state of quietness, if you will.
You started to get into a little bit of the clinical studies. I wonder if you could go a little bit deeper, because I think we read somewhere that in the trial studies, 90% of subjects reported reduced stress and improved sleep after using the product. Can you go into a little bit more depth? And then, of course, there's going to be a range of some people that lasting impact is going to be for several hours, some lingering effect, others is going to be more short term. And also any side effects of wearing this thing for a long period of time.
Then I will start with the last question. No serious side effects have ever been reported. I think some people reported over time, and we are into obviously the thousands of users now, like small headaches, which could be triggered by either the pressure of the device. Some people are very sensitive to that, the vibration, but there is absolutely no counter indication to using the device unless you have really physical issues in this part of the body, which is completely different. But like nothing has been reported, even with consistent repeated use. I'm not obviously a vested interest, but I've been using this device for 3 years, twice a day, and I only have great things to report. And honestly, the few side effects reported were at most like minor headaches, which is perfectly livable. That the other thing I want to say about those numbers you quoted, which are correct, we perform studies, different types of studies over the period of the past 5 years now. Some were just one shot, 20-minute session on individuals and getting their feedback after with various questionnaires, which is what's used the most in neuroscience today. They are questionnaires, right? There's no hard evidence in neuroscience. The best thing you can do is have someone tell you how they feel. And we know for a fact in neurostimulation, which is our field, that usually 10% of potential users are not non-responders. Then already you have like factored in all these studies, like it's likely that 10% or a little more people won't respond because the technology doesn't work on them, or they are more locked than possibly fixable with a light technology like that, or other reasons which are not necessarily explained. And then we have applied these technologies, and either one time or many other studies much more involved took up to a month to 6 weeks of daily use twice a day, some on just regular users, some on symptomatic users for some clinical claims like generalized anxiety disorder. So we have all kinds of studies. And out of all these studies, the decrease on both on the stress decrease or anxiety decrease or the improvement in sleep were staggeringly high. Obviously, there is always a component of placebo when you start telling people they're going to get better, or you put something on your head, you will feel something, which is hard to separate completely from the effect, which is why our pure clinical trials, which I cannot detail too much because that's still under FDA review, always have a placebo or sham arm to really compare the pure placebo effect versus the strength of our active technology. But long story short, all our studies have shown a massive improvement in these two areas, and now in cognition over a period of time. And then the lasting effect, we have systematically called back people who are part of our long-term studies, like our 30 days to 45 days studies, months later, asking them if they felt still anything, because we took back the device after the study. And the majority reports lasting effects in the sense they are more patient, they are still more resilient to stressful events. Then there was a teaching process, which is again the strengthening of the insular cortex, which tends to remain even without applying the technology much longer. So all those are very interesting preliminary results. We hope that many academic institutions will take over the research part of it, because there's only that much we can do as a small company. But the potential of this technology, which is very non-invasive, external, is probably much bigger than we think, and we are probably not doing it entirely right today. We believe there is a lot still to discover.
Of course, as part of our daily work as VCs, we've of course come across medical devices, headsets, and EEG, other peripherals that is helping to influence the neural activities. So is Cove being positioned as a therapeutic medical device, or is it being positioned in the marketplace as more of a general health wearable?
Then Cove today is a wellness device as per FDA, regulations and recommendations, and there is a very clear list of claims you can make without FDA clearance, including sleep and stress, which don't require to go through the FDA for approval. In parallel, and as you mentioned earlier, Feelmore is kind of the overall blanket company. And we have a subsidiary which is working, still stealth, which is working actively with the FDA to get the technology also cleared by the FDA, allowing then doctors, maybe under different brands, that's all that is going to be revealed later on, to be prescribed for actual clinical claims, which we are clearing one by one with the FDA. Then the strategy for us is neuromodulation for the consumer, for the wellness markets, but also mechanical neuromodulation for symptomatic patients of psychiatrists, medical doctor. We know that over 35 million people a year consult a doctor for anxiety. Those are massive issues which are usually treated through medication or therapy. And we know that the drugs are effective a very short period of time, and they're very addictive. And we may be prescribed as an adjunct treatment, we may be prescribed as a substitution. All that is still under discovery, but before the end of the year, we should have definitely much more to share on the topic.
I think from the pharmaceutical point of view is sometimes it's not seen as this or that, but rather, to your point, it's complementary. And they can actually say that the efficacy actually goes up and dependency on their medication exclusively may kind of go down. So in many ways, it's significant. And of course, who doesn't want to take less medication and have still the same similar effect? There's a lot of interesting avenues. You mentioned kind of more medical grade that's being worked on behind the scene. And then, of course, a consumer product that's currently out there now. Is that as the form factors start to continue to miniaturize, I wonder if something like this could get integrated into helmets. So, for example, soldiers out on the field, to those that are athletes that's wearing some sort of a helmet or a cap, for instance, to even VR, where as much as the gaming platforms want you to be in a high adrenaline state, you still have to calm down, and wearing VR for more than several hours can be quite stressful as well. So how do you see yourself as not just the final form product, but at some point a subcomponent to bigger things?
I think you hacked our business plan. But you are spot on in many ways. Yeah. Then in terms of form factor, I'm not showing it because the patent is not issued yet, but we have a smaller form factor coming up within the next 12 months. Definitely, we learned a lot from our MVP going to market a year ago. Then even less bulky, and I'm dreaming of a time where you don't even need a wearable to apply those. But that's obviously science fiction. But otherwise, you're absolutely right. Integrating in existing. First of all, I believe the future of wearable is not necessarily that each wearable will have its own form factor, and then your real estate is getting completely, overwhelmed between your watch, your Apple Watch, your Whoop, your Oura, and then it's just not productive to have to multiply for one functionality only the real estate you occupy on the body. And it's not it's something with the glasses, interaction with headphones, with hearing aid for some people. I mean, we know it's not ideal. Then overall, yes, conversation will and have taken place with headset manufacturers. Definitely they really master this part of the body. Why not integrate there? And all we need is the ability to turn it on for 20 minutes at a time, a few times a day. We don't need much more. All the people who already are all the trackers combined with us could be very useful because we get more data also to exploit. We are talking to the DoD, talking about the Army, for potential application, especially in the cognitive space. That's something they are very interested in. Then, yeah, totally. For us, the future is probably in licensing the technology, is probably in definitely miniaturization. I don't believe a single freestanding device will necessarily be a huge, success in terms of numbers, because just again it's one more device to own and charge and think of using. I think now we are making the point, proving the point that it's working, getting enough people to love it, and then probably moving to much bigger and faster ways to be on your head.
Well, coming back to full circle, your background in luxury is that when people are shopping for high-end goods, there's a lot of anxiety, envy, self-doubt, to just general judgment. And I wonder, complementing maybe with your purchase of purse or shoes or outfit, you also get a Cove as well, because it helps you to alleviate these internal struggles that one may have. Because at the end of the day, that they're trying to mitigate these risks and issues. With that said, how can people get a hold of the Cove device today?
Two ways here in the US, our website, feelcove.com, or it's available on Amazon as well. Then these are the two places where you can find it. We are happy to provide a code for your listeners as well, offering a 20, I can share it here, or you will post it when you release the podcast. But yeah, this is a way to get it.
Amazing. So with that, we have been joined by Francois Kress, who is the CEO of Feelmore Labs. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you very much.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.